Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Ethan Bachinski, an engineer that is just beginning his journey in the e-commerce space. Ethan played Division I football at Western Illinois University and then continued his education at the University of Iowa, where he earned his Bachelor of Science in Engineering in Mechanical Engineering. In the last year, Ethan has leveraged his engineering skills to create products using a CNC machine and 3D printer. Welcome to the show, Ethan. First things first, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, Dave and Ken, thank you so much for having me on. Like he said, I was actually a two-sport athlete at Western Illinois. I did football and track and field.
That's right.
Yes. So I was a two-sport athlete. I was a thrower. I'm not very fast, so I was a thrower at Western Illinois. I went there because, like every high school athlete, I wanted to go play in the pros, which clearly did not happen, as why I am working as an engineer now today. But I pursued my dream of playing football, and I chose football over the academics. And it was right about my end of my junior year, maybe my senior year, when I was like, all right, I really need to hunker down and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life, because, like I said, athletics is not going to happen for me after college, or continuing, on to the next level. So I had talked to my father, and I had said, he's like, what do you love to do? He's like, what do you like? What are you good at? And I was like, well, I like to hunt and fish. I like to be outdoors. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, they're not really doing anything in that. So he's like, what are you good at? I was like, oh, I'm good at math and science. And he's like, okay, go be an engineer. And I had always loved, solving problems, like tinkering is what I consider myself. I'm a tinkerer. So I went down the road of engineering, and I decided on mechanical engineering because it is a very broad spectrum in the engineering world, because there's so many disciplines you can go into. And I feel that the mechanical aspect of engineering encompasses most everything. So like that saying goes, like jack of all trades, master of none. I'd like to think that I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. But and then while I was at the university, I was a teaching assistant in the manufacturing lab, and I ran the CNC, which stands for Computer Numerical Control, the CNC lab, which also encompassed our 3D printing. So that's how I kind of got my start in running a CNC machine and a 3D printer. And I graduated, got a job, and when the pandemic hit, I had a lot more free time on my hands. So some stuff got cut at work, and I had some free time, and I was like, you know what? I'm bored. I want to do something more. So I bought a CNC machine, and I won a 3D printer actually on this website that I bought my CNC machine from. So it was kind of like a 2-for-1. So I got both of those. I got them set up, and the rest is kind of history. I had started talking to you, and you had said, like, hey, you can kind of do some of this stuff and sell it online. And I'm like we said, I'm in the beginning of my journey, and just plugging along, having fun while doing it. So that is a little bit about myself.
Very nice. Now, for people that have no idea what you're talking about when you say CNC, can you describe loosely what this looks like and what someone would use a CNC machine for?
Yes. So in layman's terms, a CNC is really, it's basically just a power drill or a router that is controlled using coordinates on a computer. And you draft something up in what's called CAD, which is computer animated drawing. You draw that up however you want, and you can make anything you want. Signs, jewelry, little figurines. The possibilities are endless. You draw that up. You export it to the software that then basically turns your drawing into just tens of millions of points on a computer screen. And then you just basically hit start on your CNC machine, and it's just a drill that kind of runs around, and wherever there's a point, it drills a hole or carves it out. And my wife considers it super nerdy, because I get all giddy when it starts running. And I actually, when I was first starting and getting back into it, and kind of learning, I was making so many mistakes, and she would just hear me just kind of like cuss in the background. I won't cuss on your podcast, but I cuss like a sailor. But yeah, she could hear me, but then she'd hear me, I'd be like, babe, come here, look at this, come look at this. She'd come downstairs and she's like, oh sweet, you drew a line. And I'm like, but I did it right, It's the taking something from just your imagination, drawing it on a computer screen, and then actually bringing it to life is what really drew me to not only engineering, but to the like the CNC world, or like the computer based graphics design world, which in my full-time career, I work as a product design engineer also, which the e-commerce business is supplementing my hobbies and habits and helping me out with that.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I really like that. Well, for one, that you won the 3D printer in a contest. That's pretty badass.
Yeah.
And two, you've used your skills and your passion to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. I think it's gonna help you out long term for sure. Ethan, can you share a little bit about kind of what your goals are for your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So being in the beginning stages, I kind of I'm trying to plan out exactly where I see myself. And in any job interview, they always ask you like, what's your 1 year, your 5 year, your 10-year goal? And I'd always thought, like, in an interview, I was like, that's why, what is the point of that? It's like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to work, I'm going to get my, I'm going to, in 1 year, I'll be where I'm going to be. In 5 years, I'll be where I'm going to be. In 10 years, I'll be where I'm going to be. But thinking of it from like a business owner aspect, it's like, okay, what do I want to do? What are my goals? What do I need to accomplish in 1 year to reach step number 1 of that goal, step number 2 of that goal? So really my goal for 1 year is to get my obviously get my Etsy page to a point to where I think it's good enough to start scaling up, to start increasing my listings, to buy, to increase my manufacturing. Because right now my manufacturing is going to be, it's a tipping point to where you start hitting your sales, to where how much you can manufacture. And I'm at the point where I know how much I can manufacture, but if my sales start taking off and hitting that, I'm going to have to increase and expand into either, right now I'm running it out of my basement. I'm going to have to either go into a shop or, start demoing some walls in my house, which my wife would 100% not be happy about. So, yeah, my 1 year goal is what I'm focusing on right now. Just increase the sales and the traffic to my website, and scale up from what I'm at right now. So I would say right now I'm at the baby steps of everything, of being like, okay, this is where I'm at. I gotta, coddle this baby to make sure I form it to what I want it to be. And then I can scale up from there. Once I set the groundwork, then you can go.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like that, you didn't come out with world domination, with this 100 stage, 10-year business plan. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we get tripped up on the too much. And I really like how you have honed in on what your goals are, and you're at year 1, and these are the things you need to do to get that. I really like that. That's awesome. Now, one follow-up to that. Now, you are a full-time engineer working, and you're doing this in your spare time. Now you have production under control. And so when you get to that, so you have a number in mind of your machine, right? You have probably have just a limited amount of machines. And so when you get to that point, then you're basically in stage 2. And I'm assuming is that once you get to a certain point with scale and you would kind of go full time, leave your job, things like that, or do you see yourself doing both? Or
I really love what I do for my full-time career right now. I love having the freedom that my company gives me. So at this moment, I'm not thinking leaving my career right now, but the end game is obviously fire the man and be my own boss. If all these the stars align and my dominoes are stacked up correctly, that should happen. But there's those what ifs in the world that you can't plan for. And that's, there's risk and reward in everything that you do. And I'm planning for the future, and I'm planning, right now that, so I have a friend that played in the NFL. So he wasn't drafted in the NFL. He had always said, he's like, people would say to him, like, well, what's your backup plan? What's your backup plan? What are you going to do if you don't make the team? What if you do if you don't make the team? And he had always said, and this has stuck with me for like the 7 years that I've known him, is he's like, people that have a backup plan don't believe in themselves enough. And I that had always stuck with me. And I was like, okay. So I'm like sitting here right now today talking to you, and I'm like, okay, like I don't necessarily have a backup plan. Like my plan right now is to grow my business, get to the point to where I can run my business full time, bring on more staff, do this, scale up production, and then, go from there. And then hopefully, the sky's the limit, because like I said, if you can think it with a CNC, you can make it. Same with the 3D printer. You can do, almost anything you can think of, you can make. Those hands that are on, Ken, I'm looking at your screen right now.
Yeah.
The hands on there, like you can 3D print those. You can make those on a CNC, and there's some amazing videos out there on YouTube that I've found that have helped me, hone my skills and be like, oh my, I had no idea I could make that. I had just thought about, if I'd only thought about it one way, a little slightly differently, that's, how I, was able to accomplish that. So to, short story long, for your question on the plan is yes, I would love to grow this to a point to where this is my full-time job, and take it from there, and hopefully the sky's the limit.
Yeah. No, that's good. And it sounds like there's some people that are scrambling to try to figure things out. And it sounds like you're on the other side of the spectrum, whereas you have a very stable career that you really like, you have a good employer that you really like. And so this is just, so there's no pressure on you to do anything. This is kind of just doing it at your own pace. No, that's great.
Ethan, one thing that I think makes your story unique is that you are going the self-manufacturing route. And the typical business model in e-commerce is you go over to China or wherever, you source a product, you bring it into the country, and then you sell it. And so can you speak to what has been your experience there in the self-manufacturing space, and how do you see, on a go forward basis?
So there's a couple points I want to talk on the self-manufacturing. And this, I know there's a lot of people that they go out and they find somebody to make their product for them. I am very much I will never hire anybody to do anything in my house. And my reasoning behind that is like, okay, I'm going to go pay. So for example, right now we have drywall. We have somebody that needs to come and do drywall, and my wife wanted me to get a quote. So I was like, okay, like we'll get a quote. So guy comes, gives me a quote, and I'm like, okay, it's expensive. Like it's more money than I wanted to pay. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, what can I do? How can I do this? So I went on YouTube, I went and I looked online. I'm figuring out how to do this, I've patched drywall holes in my old college house. I've painted rooms. I've never done insulation. I've never done, a tar roof. I've never, done any of this, but I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to do it, because if I hire somebody and I'm not happy with the job, I'm going to be pissed at them. I'm going to be happy. Like, okay, I overpaid you because you did a shitty job. Or, whereas if I were to do it myself, the only person I can be upset with is myself. So that's kind of why I'm like, okay, I want to do the manufacturing, because I can make the exact product that I want. I can make it to my own tolerances. I can make it out of whatever material I want. I can make it the size I want. I pretty much handle the power, like all of the constraints there are in my power. And I took on the manufacturing because I had the capability of doing it. I had the CNC machine. I had the knowledge of knowing, like, okay, what does it take to manufacture X, Y, Z? I knew how to do that. I knew how to draft things up. The other aspect of manufacturing that I like taking on myself is like, you're your own, it's a blessing and a curse. You're your own worst enemy, because being a one man or one person shop where I'm doing all my manufacturing, I'm kind of taking care of everything. I can't scale as quickly as somebody who's like, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to get it from them. But I'm not knocking on anybody that's doing that, because that is a very smart business move. But I'm like, I am making the best possible product that I can make. And I think I'm the only one that can make it that way right now. And some people might think that's cocky, but if I don't know, I think this is the route I want to take, because I think that I have the skill enough to make it better than anyone. Because I know how this machine works. I know how to draw it up. I know how to draft it. I know how to, I know, there's the umbrella over everything. I can control all these parts, and I know how to manipulate these parts to make it all work.
I think in your case, it makes a lot of sense to be in charge of the manufacturing, right? In your day job, you are working in that world. You have an interest in the CNC machine. And so I think that in your case, that it makes total sense. And that is your superpower, right? Like the design in the CNC. And so, yeah, I absolutely, I've shared on this podcast, story of the cutting board company that I had, that lost money, and I ended up closing down. And that was an example of self-manufacturing. And we all go into that. I've went into it plenty of times on previous podcasts, but if you look at like a Steve Jobs, he was the one building the computer. There's this hunting brand that I like called Mystery Ranch, and the owner is loves commercial sewing machines, and he still sews all the bags. Wow. And he's like a hands-on guy, and his superpower is like different types of stitching, and he makes just awesome products. And so you can point to a lot of examples where businesses start off self-manufacturing and get that competitive edge.
Yes. A couple other things I want to say, like you said, if you have the capabilities of making it, and you can, come up with these different kind of stitches, or you can make something that's unique, by all means, go do it. Also, with manufacturing, when you start launching new products, there's a lot of headaches that I've run into with some of the products that I make for people. It's, I tell them like, okay, I give myself a deadline. When I first started this, I was like, people would just kind of reach out to me and be like, hey, can you make this for me? Can you make this for me? And I'm like, sure. I was like, I could probably get it done in 4 days time. And that's, getting the wood, getting it planed down, getting it, put on the machine, getting it designed, getting it carved out, sanded, stained, finished, the whole shebang. But you find, when you're doing this, you're like, okay, this is something I've never made before. So you're going to make a few mistakes. And that's a part of the game in my mind. Like I consider it, being an athlete, like making those mistakes, that's practice. That's the practice that you do. You practice Monday through Friday. Saturdays are game day. You have 5 days to correct all your mistakes. And then Saturday is game day, where you try putting it all together. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And just, I realize it gets frustrating, and it can get frustrating in a hurry. But as long as you just, keep telling yourself, that one was, 70%. The next one's going to be 75% better. The next one's going to be 80%, 90, 95. And then finally you're like, boom, 100%. At that point, you're like, okay, now I'm here. Now I have this product, not necessarily mastered, but I have it down to where I can make it well enough to where I can sell this. Because you make it once, you know all the mistakes that you made, then you can replicate that. Replication, again, in manufacturing is the key.
Ethan, as you've launched a couple of these, initial products, and you start getting some, some momentum, what's been one of the biggest obstacles for you to get a product launched?
The biggest obstacle that I've found, and Ken and we've talked about this before, that I found, is just figuring out how to reach my audience. What audience do I want? I have brought my wife on board to start taking photos, because it doesn't matter how good of a camera I have. I could try taking a selfie and it would still be blurry. Like, it doesn't matter the camera I have. I don't know what it is, but I am inept when it comes to using a camera. Figuring out what, keywords to use on Etsy or on, Facebook Marketplace, whatever platform that I'm selling on. It's difficult for me to figure out, okay, this is, what keyword do I need to use to hit this demographic, because these are the people that are going to buy, product X. These are the people that's going to buy product Y. And I found that there's a couple of these like online sites that you have talked to me about. But as far as, difficulty that I'm still running into is, I'm getting lots of people to click on my ads. It's just making that final, round and third base. I can get them to third base. I can't get anybody home.
In all fairness, you're an expert at your craft, right? Like making your products and doing those things. And then, so the other side of it is like, how do I sell this, or how do I reach people? I like that you're bringing some experts in on the photographs. That's awesome. And and as you expand, I would say, anything that you're struggling with, bring in experts and stick to it. So
to expand on that, so I'm a huge history buff also, and I was listening to this podcast about FDR, and FDR's big saying was always, he's like, being the president of the United States, he's like, if I'm the dumbest person in a room, I did it right. Like, his cabinet, he wants to surround himself with people that are smarter than him. And I'm telling myself, I was like, you know what? I don't have an issue being the dumbest person in a room. If, this person's an expert on photography, this person's an expert on SEO, this one, Etsy ads, this one's an expert on whatever it is in my business that I need to do. If I, surround myself with the right people, you're going to be, you set yourself up for successful. And there's not just one person that, ever makes it successful, like being successful. Like, there's always a support team around you. And, thankfully, I have a very supporting wife who loves all of my, they all start out as stupid hobbies. She's like, oh boy, he's in the garage doing something else. But, she's always like, she'll come up with project ideas for me too, or, things that I should sell on Etsy. And she's like, this is a great idea. And I know when she's excited about it, I know it's like, okay, we're in this together. We are a team, let's move forward and, keep going with it. So
now, Ethan, what advice would you give entrepreneurs that have a product idea that they want to build a company around? And if you can, try to answer this as a non-engineer, right? If you have an idea, you're going to draw it up in CAD and you're going to put it on the 3D printer or in your CNC machine. But any advice to somebody with an idea in their head that they're trying to get into production?
Yes. So so do you want me to take him through like a step-by-step how I think they should get it from product to launch, or do you want me to be like, this is how I would do it? Or
I would just say any pro tips that you could offer that would get them from the starting line to at least being in touch with the manufacturer, pointed in the right direction.
Okay. So I would say, if you have an idea and you feel very strongly about it, you obviously pursue it. If you think it's going to do something, it could be big, it could be the next sliced bread, go for it. Take it, do whatever you need to do to kind of take it there. And first thing I would do is I'd find a mentor, find somebody who has been in the game, because they can tell you what mistakes they made and kind of lead you down the path to, they started at step 1, but they might be able to get you to start at like step 4 or 5. Like, that's not saying you're not going to make mistakes yourself, but just taking that first step of finding somebody, kind of brainstorming with them, talking to them, reach out to them and be like, hey, I have this idea. I have no idea how to make it or what to do with it. Like, what are your thoughts? How do I take it, move it, kick it down the path, and, do your research online, Google. Here at work, we're a room full of engineers. If we don't know how to do something, you want to know what we do? We Google it. And it's people might say like, oh, that, that's, that doesn't mean anything, but it's like there's some of the software that you use, and I'm sure like Dave, you used to be an accountant, and Ken, you were in IT, correct?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure there's software that both of you use that you're like, I don't know how to do this. Maybe I just Google it, or I ask somebody else that knows it. And if I ask somebody that and nobody knows it, we sure as hell go to the Google machine and we figure it out. So yeah, just do your research, figure out how it needs to be made. That would be, a big step, is because then you can eliminate a lot of conversations where you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, you're in the wrong place, bud. Like but they might tell you you're in the wrong place now, but they might be like, hey, but this guy, this, John Doe knows exactly where you need to go. So it can be a good thing and a bad thing. Yeah, you might waste your time talking to this guy for 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes might have put you in contact with 2 other people. So that would be my advice.
So Ethan, you mentioned earlier on the show podcast and mentors. What are some of the resources as you're building your company that have been the most helpful for you?
So, obviously a mentor. So I know David from my wife and David went to high school together. So that's kind of how we grew that. So David is a mentor of mine. Ken, you're a mentor of mine. You and I have touched base a couple times. I consider you both mentors, because you guys have been there, you've been in my shoes, and, you're obviously much further down the path than I am, and you're able to give me a lot of great advice. Other resources that I use for if I'm figuring out, being my own manufacturer, if I'm like stuck on something on how I don't know how to make it, I go to Google. I figure out how, most of the times you can find something on YouTube, or on a lot of the products I make are out of wood. You can go on, like, there's woodsmith.com, there's woodworkersparadise.com, and they have all sorts of they have dozens upon dozens of videos on how to set things up, how to carve things, how to, they kind of take you from, from setting your machine up all the way to a finished product. As far as figuring out what products I want, I start kind of with myself, and I think like, okay, what do I like? What would I do? What things do I use around my house that I think I could improve on? Or what things on my house do I think is like, okay, this I think is made poorly, I think I can make it better. Or what do I think is cool? So then I go to, websites like Google Trends, or eRank, or, again, on the Google machine, you start at point A, just kind of typing random things in, and then you go down this path and you find yourself kind of, gaining knowledge on what products are trending right now. What do you think you can sell? What can you make? Where can you find this? Just do your research, and you can figure it out. And there are endless websites on pros and cons, and there's positives and negatives on every single one of them that kind of help you. But YouTube is probably the number one thing I use for helping me grow my business, because there's people on there all the time, just, they're vlogging about, this is what I did here, and it, took my sales from A to B. And it's like, yeah, you might not take your sales from $500 a month to $40,000 a month, but like there might be bits and pieces of information in there that you're like, okay, I didn't think of that, let me implement that. And then you sit and you wait, and you're like, okay, what other pieces of information can I gain from this person, from all these other, resources? The internet is like, just, it's a library. There's a lot of crap on there, but there's also a lot of really good stuff. And if you just dig enough, you'll find some pretty beneficial resources on there. So,
oh, Ethan, one thing that has been a common theme throughout this this show, as we're talking to you, is you really seem to figure things out, and I really appreciate that. And it's kind of frustrating to hear some people say like, I don't know how to do that. And as we stand here in 2021, like, you really don't have an excuse. You can figure out how to do anything online, and it hasn't always been that way.
right, yeah, I know.
Back in the 50s, if you want to know how to drywall or mud or tape, guess what? You got to know a drywaller, and you got to go watch them.
Yeah.
And so, and so I really like hearing your story, and that ambition is something that is admirable. So
It's a blessing and a curse. My dad is the same way that I am. He'll never hire anybody to do anything, but his famous saying is always, I know enough to be dangerous.
yeah. Yeah.
That means, he doesn't know when he's in over his head, or he doesn't, he doesn't know when, oh, I should stop here, instead of being like, I'm going to demo the bathroom and I'm going to branch into this. I know enough to be dangerous, but that's what, at the end of the day, if you break it down like engineering, that's exactly what it is. You solve problems that haven't been solved before. You figure things out that you're like, okay, how can I make product A better? How can I make product, what can I do to this to make it, fit in your hand more ergonomically? How can I make this so it cuts better? How can I make this so inject any verb that you want? So like, how do you make it better? That's exactly what it is. You figure out something, you take a problem, you find a solution for it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So the next section of the show is called the Coach's Corner. This is your opportunity to ping Ken or I with any questions that you may have as you navigate the world of e-commerce.
The question that I came up with, every single time I'd be like, okay, this is my problem. What's a good question I can ask is, my sales aren't going up. So what can I do to increase my sales? And, Ken and I had talked about this in the past. I was like, okay, first start with, your SEO, the search engine optimization, figure out what keywords will get me to my right demographic to, find that person that will buy my product. And I was like, okay, I've started investing a lot of time into that and figuring out, okay, what is my key demographic? How do I reach them? And then product photography, which is obviously, it's still a work in progress. We're still trying to, get there. And yeah, it's been a little while, and my sales are stagnant. So I'm just curious, what, and I know that's a super broad question.
I'll tell you, let me throw in a couple things, and I'm sure Ken has a couple other things, but
Yes.
there's a lot of different directions that I could go on this. But one thing that I'll say is, I think what you're experiencing is normal. On a lot of my product launches, like if you spend a lot of time on YouTube, you'll hear of these people talk about $100,000 product launches or $1 million product launches. And do I think those exist? Probably. But they're not as common as you would think. One thing that I would say is like, stick with it. I would say there's like a 3 to 6 month seasoning period. That's point number one. Point number two, and I think everybody can do this, is next time you're shopping on Amazon, be really conscious of what decisions you're making and why. And I'll give you an example. When I'm on Amazon, I look at the photo. I like, if there's multiple photos, I'll flip through them. And if there's a video, I'll flip through that. And so that's something that, if you tend to, the things that you pay attention to, most likely other people are paying attention to that. The last thing that I'll say is, and I've been around you enough times when you've done this, where you'll nerd out on, I do it with accounting, you do it with engineering, like really nerd out, like talk about types of steel and and I'll tell you what, I think if you were to get in front of a camera and you were to describe in detail the process that you're going through and show the pile of ones that you screwed up that didn't make the cut, people like to see how the sausage is made. And I think like unveiling that curtain and showing people like, dude, not only am I making this, but I'm super passionate about making this. And this may look like a wood product, but let me tell you about the type of wood, why I chose it, who I got it from. It's kiln dried, which means it's not going to flex. And all of a sudden, you've taken something that you're passionate about and like get excited about, and like shown the customer that. And I think that, so anyway, that's a long-winded Coach's Corner response, but I think there's some value there.
I wrote down nerd out.
Yeah.
So I'll piggyback a little bit off David and give a couple more things. So not to get super complicated, but and you might already have a website or not. Do you have a website?
No.
Okay.
Just the Etsy page.
I would definitely say that would be on your list of getting what we call like a home base or or a website. And then I also, so I really like what David had mentioned. You're an engineer and you make these things and you have a story, right? So you have something that people really like stories sell products. Right. So then document that on your website along with just a small catalog of your stuff. It gives another avenue, another way to make sales. Right. And then over the long term, you really want to drive your sales to your website because you're more profitable on there versus Etsy's not going to get their cut. But if you're good with camera or video, YouTube, absolutely. Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest. I think all of those, you could test them, set up, maybe you could talk to your partner, see if your wife, the one that does all the good pictures, see if she could post them up onto some of those channels, see if you get traction, right? Because at this point you're just kind of testing the waters here and to see which one of those channels is going to provide a lot of traction for the least amount of effort, right? And so if you find one, then you can go all in on it. But I really like that YouTube channel part, and then you can also repurpose those YouTube videos on your product pages and your website and social media and any other social media channels to share your story. Because once someone, if someone's typing up XXX whatever your product is and they see it on YouTube is a search engine, right? So if they type up something and it pops up there, then they see a video of you in there on your machines and making this, and then you're describing it and everything, and then there's a link right on there to go to your website and buy it. That might offer you hopefully that's a couple little things. And then lastly, I would like to say, kind of echo what David mentioned. This is the long game, and it takes patience, and it's not an overnight. So definitely give yourself some credit for where you're at now, and then just get some plans in motion, but definitely know that it takes a while for, especially if you're in kind of a niche market and you're just starting out, it's going to take a while for those sales to climb up.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Advice always helps. So.
Absolutely. David, anything else, or do we get into the fire round?
Let's get into the fire round.
I need to limber up for this.
All right. Before we get into the fire round, Ethan, you said you were a two-sport D1 athlete. What was the so football, and then you said a thrower?
Yes. So I threw discus.
Discus.
Yes, I was a discus thrower.
Nice.
Yes. So I played outside linebacker and defensive end, and then I was a discus thrower.
Okay. So this fire round is going to be very easy for you then.
All right. Let's see it.
All right. What is your favorite book?
It is The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Reason being is because in that book is the rule of 10,000. And what the rule of 10,000 is you need to spend 10,000 hours doing something before you become a subject matter expert on that. And I read this book in college, and it has stuck with me that it's like, okay, in order to be an expert in something, you need to learn as much as you can about it. And they say that, the rule of thumb is you need to spend 10,000 hours doing this before you become an expert on it. So that is why that is my favorite book, The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. There's a lot of other things in there, but that part stuck with me in particular.
Excellent. I like that one. What are your hobbies, Ethan?
Hobbies. I'm an avid woodworker. I like to tinker around the house. I love hunting and fishing, anything outdoors, and anything that I can compete in, any sport. Those are my hobbies.
Awesome. Very competitive, huh?
Yes.
Awesome. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
In that question alone, the successful e-commerce entrepreneurs, like you guys said, stick with it. Like you said it yourself, it's a long game. So you stick with it and you keep going, you weather the storm. And once you can get through that and you start, you know, it's like was it the snowball effect? You know, you start rolling with a tiny snowball. Once you get that going, you know, you coddle the baby, you keep rolling. Eventually it grows into, you know, a massive snowball.
Very cool. All right, David, you want to close out the show?
Yeah, Ethan, how can people get a hold of you?
Email is the best way to get a hold of me. So you can leave a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can find me on social media. You just search my last name. I'll be the only one that pops up.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, we'll put links to all of that in the show notes.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Ethan, wanted to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast, and good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you for everything, Ken and David.
Yeah.